I'm Roger Baker, Executive Director of the Stratfor Center for Applied Geopolitics at RANE, a global center of excellence for geopolitical intelligence and analysis. Learn how you can put geopolitics to work for your organization at ranenetwork.com.
Welcome to RANE's Essential Geopolitics podcast. My name is Emma Kami, and I will be your host today as we discuss Al-Shabaab's recent territorial losses and the prospects for Somalia's counterinsurgency strategy. Here with me today is David Newman, a global security analyst at RANE. Welcome, David.
Hi, Emma. Thanks for having me.
Recent media reports quote the U.S. ambassador to Somalia saying that Al-Shabaab has now lost roughly one-third of its territory in Somalia. So tell us, what are the main drivers of these territorial losses, and should this be counted as a major success for the Somali government's counterinsurgency efforts?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, just for some context, these territorial losses are essentially resulting from increased Somali government-led offensives against Al-Shabaab, primarily in Somalia's central regions. So Somalia's current president, Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, was elected in May of 2022, and roughly 2 or 3 months after he was elected, he formed his government, and then he declared this, quote, all-out war against the group. And so what this has ultimately led to is the Somali military working alongside a plethora of forces on the ground has intensified its pressure, military pressure on Al-Shabaab. As I said, this has primarily been located in the central Hiran region, the middle Shabelle region, and then more recently moving north to Galgaduud. And so, yes, as indicative of the U.S. ambassador's recent comments to, I believe it was Voice of America, these have led to some notable successes. The most recent reporting that I've come across from the Somali government has claimed that they have recaptured roughly 70 or so localities and or villages that were previously under Al-Shabaab's control. I will say, while this is a notable success, this is also a very, for lack of a better term, a very measured success because, to be honest with you, the challenges definitely still remain. But yes, ultimately, it's a success nonetheless.
How did these territorial losses impact the threat the group poses in Somalia and or in neighboring countries?
Yeah, I think that dovetails nicely with what I was saying about this being a measured success because, to be frank, the group still poses a very serious and deadly and destabilizing threat across the country. This is in part because the group has been around for nearly 2 decades. There have been different iterations over the course of its existence where the group's influence has waxed and waned depending on the intensity of the counterterrorism and counterinsurgency pressure. They're currently in a period where they're being sort of put on their back foot. But at the same time, the group has been able to respond with numerous deadly reprisal attacks, some of which have, over the past 6 months, occurred in the capital, Mogadishu, and even in some of the most heavily guarded areas of Mogadishu. And so the group definitely still poses, if anything, potentially an increased threat because in the face of these offensives, the group is incentivized to carry out reprisal attacks, not just against security forces, but also against local communities. Because in this case, one thing that's a bit unique about the recent government offensives in the central regions is that the Somali military enlisted the help of local clans and or sub-clan militias that were previously had either practical partnerships with Al Shabaab, or were being coerced by Al Shabaab, or were being governed by Al Shabaab. And for lack of a better word, they essentially led sort of an uprising against the group in those regions. And so that often prompts Al Shabaab to conduct reprisal attacks, assassinations against clan leaders, and things of that sort. So the threat that the group poses in Somalia is still as heightened as ever. Um, as far as the threat that the group poses to, say, neighboring countries, over the past few years, um, El Shabaab has has definitely uh, had a diminished presence in, say, neighboring Kenya, where in previous years it's been able to conduct complex attacks in Nairobi. Um, at this point, a lot of El Shabaab's activity is in the border regions, and it poses a persistent underlying threat in those border regions, conducting cross border attacks into Kenya, and last year also conducted a couple of cross border incursions into Ethiopia um, that didn't extend further inland to necessarily threaten major cities in those neighboring countries, but at the same time still prompted the Ethiopian government to deploy an additional 2,000 troops into Somalia to protect those border regions.
My final question would be, where are we headed? What's the outlook for Somalia's counterinsurgency strategy for the coming year?
Yeah, so the future success of Somalia's counterinsurgency efforts is going to hinge on a really a confluence of factors. The Somali government has definitely made a pointed effort to not just combat the group militarily, um, but also attack, for lack of a better word, the group on a political front as well as an economic front. Um, as I was saying, Al Shabaab is one of the more resilient militant groups in the world. That's in part because of its very well established revenue streams. Um, the most recent reports suggest that the group is bringing in around 100 million to 120 million dollars a year. This is from this a vast network of smuggling, extortion, money laundering that that has to be combated. And so the Somali government has made some notable steps over the past year to try and squeeze the group financially by closing down, specific banks that that El Shabaab through which El Shabaab was funneling money. But much more is needed to be done on that front. Uh, as far as militarily and politically, while the Somali government has definitely uh, reaped success in the offensives targeting Al Shabaab in the central regions, the group is even more entrenched in Somalia's southern states. And so it looks like the military is about to embark on what they're calling phase two of these operations, which is going to target the group in southern Somalia. But they'll definitely face some notable challenges there, in part because the group simply controls more territory there, probably has a larger presence there, and has more entrenched relationships with local communities that the Somali government is going to have to navigate. Um, to its credit, it's expanded its international relationships, and will probably try to leverage that in terms of security cooperation for these offensives, as well as in trying to secure and consolidate control in the central regions where it targeted the group over the past 6 to 8 months. Um, but then that leads to this final point, in that for there to be lasting success uh, in terms of the Somali government's counterinsurgency efforts, it's going to have to be able to hold territory. It's obviously notable that it was able to recapture, say it's 70 villages or localities, and it intends to recapture more. Um, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the Somali government's going to be able to actually hold and govern these territories. If anything, we've seen a few incidents where Shabaab has strategically retreated from an area before troops even arrive, and then when troops move on to target another Shabaab stronghold, the group then makes an effort to recapture that territory, and in some cases has successfully done so. And so, as far as these successes being lasting, the Somali government is going to have to implement some sort of governance strategy to be able to actually hold these territories and make these lasting successes.
Thanks for that analysis, David. Learn how geopolitical events like this could affect your business with RANE Intelligence Briefs. Our flagship risk intelligence products provide clients with access to the insights and analyses they need to make more informed decisions and drive better risk management outcomes. Sign up at ranenetwork.com. That's RANE network.com. I'm Emma Kami. Thank you for listening.